Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We haven't gotten rid of the new intro yet, and I'm happy about that. Jeff, Sharon, Eric, and Brian with you here on our first September show, boys. Doesn't really feel like September, right? It's kind of like, we got basketball playoffs on. Like, football is, like, kind of started. We had that FCS game last week. We're going to have more games this weekend. But I don't know. I'm all thrown off. Like we're 5 days away from Labor Day, and it doesn't feel like it. I don't know. Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy, what do you guys think about this?
In Florida, it never feels like September until, like, December.
It's
because
fair point.
In September, it feels like June.
It's 95 and rainy.
I'm just still thrown off by Murph's name on the open credits here, and the fact that it's his full name. We didn't just call him Murphy like the WWE does. So,
Eric, let me stop you right there. Are you trying to make me mad? Are you trying to, like, piss me off? You know, I don't
Look at that.
want my name being in the opening show credits.
I'm just saying, be glad that we didn't just call you Murphy like the WWE does with their version.
How about this? I didn't get Brian mad in the intro. How about that? That honor goes to you, Eric Lopez. We got lots to talk about today.
Tune in to next week's episode of the Black and Gold Banneret to see who will make me irate in the intro.
Brian Murphy destroys Jeff and Eric on the. Yes, eviscerates. We got a couple of things to talk about here, but we do have plenty of football news to talk about with the opt-outs. We got a list of opt-outs from UCF. Josh Heupel revealed those to us earlier this week, and one of them is already declared for the NFL draft. And we may or may not have some news on McKenzie Milton. I know you've been looking forward to that. We'll also talk a little bit about what's going on around the American. Preseason polls are out. And what UCF football is going to look like for the opener on October 3rd, or at least what we think right now in terms of attendance and what fans are going to be looking forward to. But we start with the opt-outs, and namely one specific opt-out. 10 UCF players have officially opted out of the 2020 season. The biggest names, Darryl Mack has opted out, quarterback. Tay Gowan, the defensive back. Kalia Davis and Mason Shalewa, the defensive lineman. A couple other guys were freshmen or walk-ons. Devontae Dawson was a defensive back, was expected to contribute. 3 offensive linemen, Alan Adams, Marius Benson, and Adrian Medley, and a couple other guys on defense, Elijah Benoit and Kendrick Wilson. But the big news was actually broke earlier today when Tay Gowan, it was revealed, has declared for the NFL draft. Brian Murphy, you had said in your article looking at the 10 opt-outs that Tay was probably the biggest loss on paper. Second team all conference, according to Pro Football Focus. Excellent advanced stats as a DB. In a loaded secondary, granted, but he's heading up to the next level, and so far he's the only one who's actually expressed that desire. So is it a surprise that he's going the NFL route here?
No, only because Tay for those who follow him on social media, has really been hinting at this for weeks now.
Right.
It's not. But like even knowing Tay, as I wrote in my story today about his decision to go pro, he basically was thinking about this day since before he arrived at UCF, because he thought that he would come to UCF and be a one and done player and leave after his junior year. But really, I think, and then during the bowl week, the Gasparilla Bowl week, he told me he was coming back for his senior year to sort of shine and have that spotlight without Neville Clark. He was going to be, basically assured a starting spot. And with Brandon Moore still on the mend, he was clearly UCF's best cornerback starting the season. But this has always been in the back of Tay's mind. This is always something he's really wanted to do. And this is not, people on social media will say like, well, he should have stuck around because he's not ready yet or whatever. The problem is people do not take into account a player or a person's personal background. Tay Gowan did not have like, to put it lightly, and I will not go into specifics, did not have a very easy childhood. And he really is looked upon right now to not only provide for himself, but provide for most of his family. He has a young daughter who was born premature, as he said in his message to UCF fans today, that he really, really wants to support. Plus, as he said also, he contracted COVID earlier this year, and just does not want to add in that risk of possibly contracting it again and possibly passing it on to his daughter. So there are so many things that have really nothing to do with football that are reasons why Tay has decided to go to the draft. And I hope people understand that he really, more than a football decision, this is a family decision. This is a life decision. Yeah, it really is. This is a guy who, I'll tell you this. This is a guy who, from the age of I think 5 years old, told his mother that it's okay, we're going to be all right. At the age of 5, he told her that. And so I think he's always had that sort of on his soul, on his mind, that he needs to be the guy to help everybody in his family. And so this is what he's chosen to do. And with this season, with all the uncertainty, who knows how many games we play. If he gets hurt, that would probably hurt his draft stock then. So, as we've seen many players do already across the nation, if you want to go to the draft, leave now, train for April, and just get ready. And that's what Tay has chosen to do, and I could not be happier for him.
Well, especially Murph, don't you think a small part of that, he was there when Bam Moore got hurt last year in the opener.
Yeah.
And was out for the year. And you obviously have illustrated all the examples, but that has to play in your mind. We've talked about the virus situation, but most of these teams have not had did not have spring. They haven't had the normal summer. I don't consider this a normal fall practice. Yeah. So I would argue, and this is something I'm going to be looking for, not just in the college game, but I think in the NFL this year, is do we see an uptick in injuries because of all the unusual circumstances with the lack of practice and things like that? Guys are not top tip. So if you're Gowan and your goal is to get in the NFL, take it in your own hands. Don't let it come down to either catching the virus or getting an injury. And I think the Bam injury has to be in the back of his mind. Has to be, doesn't it, Murph?
Possibly. I don't know that explicitly, but you bring up a good point, Eric. There's more risk than just COVID, contracting COVID-19 in this season. It's the run up, and we've seen, like, I know it's a different sport, but in baseball there has been a much higher incidence rate of injuries this year in baseball with the shortened training camps and stuff like that. Now, the training camp for football has been as long, but they're doing different things. They're doing things that are just not in the normal. And I wonder, how that might, reveal itself when we get to regular season play. But yeah, so I'm definitely looking for that as well. I just think, I don't know if Tay really thought about Brandon Moore's injury. I know he knows, where he was on this depth chart. I'm sure he would have liked to be the guy because he certainly would have been the number one guy in that defensive backfield at out wide corner.
Our lads actually had him as the top as a starter this year. So
no, there's no question. He's indisputable that he's absolutely their top corner outside. I mean, obviously Aaron Robinson's in the nickel on the inside. He's very good. But I'm sure he would like to have that spotlight, that challenge every week against number one receivers. But there are things both in the current situation and where we are with COVID, but also just his personal background that went into this decision. And it's not a surprise just because I know that Tay has thought about this for a long, long time.
One guy who said he would be back is Kalia Davis, and he actually confirmed that on Twitter. PFF, you mentioned, had him first team all-conference. Excellent pass rusher. He kind of, but when you add it up with him and then some of those other younger guys, I mentioned younger guys like Kendrick Wilson, although I don't know how much he would have contributed, but also, Mason Chile was, not going to be play either. So a little bit of softening on that front seven a little bit there, Murph, don't you think?
Right. And Jeff, you should know, I mean, no one else will know what I'm talking about, but it's pronounced Chalua.
Chalua. Sorry, Mason.
I know. But yeah, and so those are two defensive tackles that UCF takes out of the rotation now. UCF has rotated 7 or 8 guys on the defensive line per game, and they still have guys on the inside like Cam Good, Noah Hancock, Anthony Montalvo at D-tackle. Obviously, Kenny Tunier is the best player on the inside of the 4-3 or the 4-2-5. I'm interested to see if now, because of those two defensive tackle opt-outs, if we see UCF try to shift guys who have more traditionally played on the edge, like a Landon Woodson or a Crystal Loach, who really mostly played on the defensive end spots last year, if they would move inside more. Because I think UCF is pretty good at defensive end with guys like Randy Charlton, Stephon Zayas, Trayvon Boers-Brash. But again, I think I guess the big takeaway is UCF still has plenty of depth, plenty of guys who have game experience from last season and the season before that to sort of cover the losses on the inside of the defensive line. I am more concerned with the defensive backfield because with Tay out and Brandon Moore still healing, the outside corner spots are basically going to be Zamari Maxwell, who did play in a bunch of games last year. I believe he started 6 games. But he's really, right now, your most experienced corner on the outside, and then they're going to have to really work in a lot of freshmen. Now, the early word is these freshmen have been great. Guys like Justin Hodges, Corey Thornton, who was named by 24/7 Sports as a true freshman All-American this week. And so those guys have impressed so far in camp. But they are going to be thrown in the fire early on and often this year with Gowan gone and more coming back later. We don't know when. It sounds like Brandon Moore will play at some point this year. But, will he be the Brandon Moore of previous years? Like, we don't know that. So all of a sudden, that power secondary that we were looking at back in January. Remember, I wrote up the early depth chart back in January, and you had Brandon Moore, we thought would be healthy for the start of the season. You had Tay Gowan, and now it's like, well, both those guys won't be playing week 1. Tay won't be playing at all. And so now we're going to really see what UCF's cornerback depth, which, again, they have enough of, but what is it really made of? Yeah,
the other guy I was looking at too was Devontae Dawson, who also chose to opt out, and he was a JC transfer too.
Yeah, a JUCO corner. So again, more experience, and that's what I mean. Like UCF is going to have to force in a lot of true freshmen into likely starting spots.
Any chance that they get Devad Wilson in and eligible, or is there no word on that just yet?
There's no word on that, and I know I get asked about it every week, and there's still no word. As soon as UCF knows, like that's not one of the things that UCF will try to hide from the media. Like if a guy gets his exception, his waiver, like they'll let us know. So Devad Wilson or Jaden Francois I mean, I think Wilson would be if he's cleared to play, it would be gigantic just because of what he's already seen in the SEC. He has experience there against top competition. But also, I don't want fans to panic. Like, I remember
Too late
last year. Yeah, I know, right? But like Tony Gray, who is now transferred, but Tony Gray last year, once he was transferred from Ole Miss, I believe he got word that he received his waiver to play. He got his transfer waiver on the Tuesday or Wednesday of the FAMU game. So these things could arrive, 48 to 72 hours before a game starts, and as long as those guys are practicing, and at this point they all are, then I would not worry, until we get to if we get to September 17th and we don't know if Devon Wilson's eligible or not, then we can start to fret a bit.
One thing I did want to ask you also is about the O-line, because we touched upon this last week where, with Gray transferring, where does that leave UCF's O-line depth? And, the answer was, well, not as good as it was when he was here. And in addition to that, 3 guys all elected to opt out. And I remember you said last week on the show that, if God forbid something happens, UCF is going to have to rely on that depth, and especially in the offensive line. Well, guess what? That depth just took a major hit with Allen Adams, Lamarius Benson, and Adrian Medley, all of whom are youngsters, but they've all decided to opt out. Are you more worried about the offensive line now?
A little bit, only because you're just taking away bodies. Again, I don't really know, how much those guys would have contributed. Lamarius Benson was in a few games, but like the guy, we don't really know if those guys would have had a major role this season, because the offensive line at the top, as far as like the top 6 or 7, is pretty solidified, and all of those guys are still there.
Two of the guys who opted out were redshirt freshmen, by the way.
Right,
Sorry, I
exactly. So the top of the depth chart of the offensive line is intact. I'm not concerned with that, and they have guys. They have guys like Sam Jackson, as we've talked about before on the show, that can play every position, gives you a lot of flexibility. The problem would become, like, let's say they have a rash of injuries, or certainly this year, let's say you have an outbreak at a certain position, and it's offensive line. Well, now those lost bodies would really come back to haunt you, I assume. But right now, it's not reason to worry, because we just don't. I don't know how those 3 would have fit in this year beyond like mop-up duty and like late game reserve. They're really kind of blocked by a bunch of guys who have already sort of solidified their spots on the 2 deep.
Well, and I would also counter, if you're already depending on redshirt freshmen to fill up your offensive line starting lineup, you're probably already in trouble. You're probably done at that point. So if you're to that point, I wouldn't have put it to that way. I would not have been depending a lot of stock in them getting a lot of playing time outside of the mop-up duty. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, okay, but there are exceptions. I mean, Edward Collins.
Sure.
Edward Collins is probably going to start at one of the tackle spots. He played 11 games last year. He started 3 of them as a redshirt freshman. So certainly there are. I mean, I believe, didn't Jordan Johnson start as a freshman? Obviously Cole Schneider was.
Sure. Right. I would say 1, but I mean, if you're depending on all 3 of them, like we're talking about, that would have been a problem. That would have been a problem. Now,
two of those guys, the offensive linemen, spent most of last year with the scout team, and like I said, I think if you look at not only the 5 across the line with Marcus Tatum, Boudreaux, Sam Jackson, Cole Schneider, Collins, but Lokai Paule, which I believe I just pronounced correctly, shocking to me. They have depth at they certainly have depth at the guard position, and they can also switch out guys to tackle as well. I'm not concerned yet. The concern comes if they have some sort of injury or virus outbreak. Again, if we take away anything from this discussion, it's that I'm most concerned about the cornerback group on the outside, because they're going to be depending on a lot of guys who haven't played college football.
Now, Murph, you guys were able to talk to Josh Heupel earlier this week. We got a couple of bites from him on that. Here is first Josh Heupel talking about the opt-outs, and then him discussing Tay Gowan.
Well, I mean, everybody's perspective and situation with COVID is different, and they're all valid and real. It's most unique thing that most of us have ever encountered in our lifetime, right? And so we've tried to educate our guys continuously as what the best practices are, educate them on what we're doing here to help try to keep them as safe as possible. Each of these kids that chose to opt out have different reasons behind their decision. They're valid, they're real. We support those guys and we'll continue to help them. Obviously they're going to be away from our program and that type of thing, but continue to help them in other areas of their life.
Coach, with Tay Gowan opting out, what does that second cornerback spot look like? And Corey Thornton getting an All-American honor yesterday, is he a part of that competition?
Yeah, Corey's played extremely well. First 4 days of spring ball, I said that. When we had our first interview, he was one of the names that I brought up. He's been really steady, playing with great confidence, and he's doing that because he's playing with great technique. He's able to reset from one play to the next play and just go play it free and independent of what's happened beforehand. His physical attributes, his length at the line of scrimmage, causes issues for wide receivers, his length, and expect him to have a huge year. Samari Maxwell's had a good training camp as well. Some of the other young quarterbacks that I talked about, maybe a week ago, have played extremely well as well, and there's a lot of competition there right now.
So that's Josh Heupel talking about their options at cornerback with Tay Gowan opting out. I mentioned Corey Thornton, leading into that question. And then Josh, as you guys heard, sort of referenced a few guys that, quote, he mentioned earlier. And then he meant 2 weeks ago when we were on with him. We asked him about who's standing out in camp, and he brought up some of the freshman defensive backs, Justin Hodges, Quadric Bullard, and Devontae Brown. And so that's what he meant when he was saying those other guys that I mentioned earlier. But again, all those guys, along with Thornton, young guys who have not been tested at this level, will be getting or should be getting or are fighting for significant snaps. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Speaking of things that people always ask Josh Heupel about when we get the chance, McKenzie Milton. Still no word, but everyone's going to microanalyze anything Josh Heupel says about McKenzie's recovery. Here is Heupel discussing just that.
I don't think week one he'll be ready to go. It's remarkable what he has done, and you look at from the initial injury, making sure that he's able to keep his leg, to get to being able to live a normal life, to now becoming an elite athlete, and guy just continues to defy the odds and push through every obstacle that comes in front of him. There's been a bunch. And you just can't say enough about his physical, mental, psychological endurance and, the strength that it takes to navigate a rehab like he's been going through. And that's something that I think the players inside of our program see and recognize. And, through their ups and downs during the course of a day, a week, it's something that they can point to stay the course. And, I think he's, on his way to becoming coming back and playing at in a really elite level again, and how fast he gets there, we're going to continue to see.
So Murph, for some reason, people willingly hallucinated at your tweet that announced that recap that bite, saying, "Oh my God, he's coming back!" And actually, no, he's working on it, right?
Yeah. So, the question, there about will McKenzie, he was asked, will McKenzie be ready for week one? And that's why you heard Heupel kind of shoot that down right away. No, he will not play week one. And what I tweeted out from that bit was the part where he says that, McKenzie's on his way back to becoming a really elite level player. And I don't know if people misread that, because people saw that and started freaking out as if, oh, he's close. He's really close. No, I think it's a coach speaking really well of this player who is, just had a phenomenal, inspiring rehab. And I know there's still quite a long ways for him to go. And I think it's Heupel just being optimistic that, yes, at some point you will see McKenzie Milton be a really, really good player again. But I don't think that's on the horizon per se. And so, it's just some positive coach speak here.
But he was really, but I mean, it's one thing to be positive, Murph, but he was like, he could have easily said, hey, he's doing great. It's progress. It's going to take some time in this. But he was like, hey, he'll be back at that elite level. I think that's what got fans kind of like, whoa, hey, that was a pretty more than positive by Josh Heupel. That was a pretty wow, really? You think he'd be at that high elite level? And then I think
what would you have liked him to say? Hey, when he comes back, he'll be in and out. He'll be okay. I mean,
No, I'm just saying, hey, it's gonna sometimes coaches will say, hey, look, it's just gonna take some time, but he's making right progression, but he was pretty high positive, and I think this goes after UCF posting photos of him running, and so I think that's why I'm defending the fans a little bit in that, there's a lot of stuff being thrown out there now, that would cause a reaction. That's all. I defend the fans' reaction to that a little bit, and they're obviously invested in McKenzie in this situation and how it plays out. I wasn't expecting Josh to go that out of his way to talk about McKenzie the way he did.
By far, it was the most optimistic, rose-colored statements that he's had about McKenzie so far. That is noteworthy. That he was able to not only say that he is, on his way, he's doing well, but that he called him, he'll be an elite level player again. And I think people caught on to that. But just also understand, it's still, I would say, still a pretty long way off, and there's still a lot of rehab for him to do. And so, I respect the question he was asked about, will he be out there week 1? But that was never going to be in the cards, and I'm still skeptical that he will play any part of meaningful minutes this year. But yes, just judging by his words and what he said, it is the most optimistic, that he's ever, the most optimistic words he's ever used with McKenzie.
And I also think, by the way, the reaction, you keep in mind, a lot of people had just found out that Darryl Mack is opting out. So now you're asking about Milton. So that's going to be what about Milton? But as it turns out, the guy that's going to be I don't know if it's the benefactor or whatever, so depending on what your perspective is, the new backup quarterback at UCF will not be McKenzie Milton. That's for sure. That's going to be who, Murph?
Well, it's going to be Jeff Sharon's boy.
It's going to be Quadri Jones and his career 517 passer rating. That's who.
This is, and Jeff Sharon is not. He's not ashamed to say he is leading the Quadri Jones fan club.
Listen. I am the unofficial chancellor of the Quadri Jones fan club for that very reason, that he has yet to throw an incomplete pass as a UCF Knight, and 2 of his career passes have gone for touchdowns. So and, you know what? Sue me.
For what it's worth, Heupel did say that Quadri has done a phenomenal job in camp. He was splitting reps evenly with Darryl Mack before Mack left. And I think Heupel said, quote, Quadri is willing and more than capable of playing at a championship level at the quarterback position. And it's just it's been an interesting, 9-10 months for Quadri Jones, has it not? I mean, 10 months ago, he's at a different school after leaving UCF.
Alabama State he committed to.
Yes. And then shortly thereafter, before spring ball, he's back at UCF, and now he's the number 2 quarterback behind Dylan Gabriel.
Now imagine if he had left and Darryl still opted out, then you would have had Parker Navarro as the backup behind Dylan Gabriel, most likely, right?
Well, maybe. Who never? That's kind of a tough what if game, though, right? I mean, that's a lot of what ifs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fair point. That's fun to speculate. I mean,
but let me just say,
what are we going to do, right?
Right. I mean, you never know what happens there with, if maybe UCF decides to go after another quarterback, if Quadri would not have returned, right? I mean, who knows? So I don't know about that, but look, I think it's a positive story, right? I mean, you mentioned you know the background. I think first of all, credit to Josh Heupel. Can we give credit to Josh for addressing the opt-outs, addressing the Milton questions? I thought he handled this very well. I give credit to the 10 players that opted out and how they handled it. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see them really talk about it on social media announcing it. They all kind of waited until it was out there, and then they commented on it. I thought everybody handled this well. Credit to you, Murph. You've asked a question in the media availabilities, and I just think this is all a lot of positives. I think there's not, I hate, I'm not surprised by it, but I was disappointed in the college national media making this sound like a negative story, which I don't see it as a negative story. The big headline is 10 players opt out. Well, the reason that 10 players opted out is because they all announced it at the same time. But I think you got to look deeper in this story. I think you got to look at it deeper. Each of those 10 individuals have their own story and their own reasons to do it. And there's no, and I thought Josh did a great job, and we played the clip, that it's all valid. Some of those are concerns about the virus. Some of them is obviously like Tay's going pro. Some of them, quite frankly, some of those players weren't going to get a lot of playing time. They have an extra year to play with now with the NCAA ruling about the extra year. So why not opt out, focus on your studies, and come back next year? And you know what? There might be some guys like Mac that might look elsewhere. I think it's all positive personally, and I just want to applaud. I give Josh credit for addressing it, because there's a lot of schools out there that are not addressing any of this. And so I just want to give credit to all of them, and a shame on the national media to try to make this a negative spin on it, which I think was unfair. But that's college football negative media.
Let's be fair here. Like you said, the reason why you think it's negative is because all you saw was the headline: 10 players opt out, and then everyone says, "Oh my God, what's the matter with UCF?" Where you made the great point that, with a lot of other schools, these opt-outs have come one at a time, right? And the other thing is, as we alluded to before, most of the national audience doesn't understand how deep UCF is at those positions. So, in a headline-only world, I can see why it would come off as negative, but I don't think that they're actively trying to make that a negative thing. It's just, that's how non-UCF fans want to perceive it, is, oh my God, look at UCF, everyone's leaving. It's like, no, stop it. It's no different than anybody else, really.
And the concerns that those players had, were or maybe are still shared by the players who are still here. Players who are still going to play the season, because they're still asking the coaches about, so what's all that we need to do, and what's all going to be done for us to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. I think everybody is concerned to different levels, but
I think that's a positive, Murph. Though, see, I think some people are looking at it as a negative. I don't think that's a negative. I think there's a positive, that there's dialogue and there's open communication. Because let's be honest, and I won't mention schools, but we've seen reports of other schools that has not been the case at all. And I think if you're a UCF fan, if we all are, I think you have to like the fact. If you're a player, you like the fact that you have that dialogue available to you and that you have options. I think that's what we should be celebrating, and I think UCF's handling this well, and I wish the national media would actually focus on that instead of trying to spin this as a negative. Because I think to me, there's other schools that are not handling this the right way, that have not talked about it, that's not being looked at.
I think if you're a guy like I think Mason Chalua is the perfect example. All right, he's a redshirt junior. He's probably going to be a backup again, but he's also entering his last semester before his graduation. So he's already got the extra year eligibility in his back pocket, and he's one semester away. With all of the uncertainty going on, why don't I just focus on my studies this final semester, graduate, and then once hopefully everything improves in the spring and we're in a different climate with the virus, and then I can come back and I still have 2 years that I can use to play college football.
Smart.
Yeah.
It's just smart. It's smart. And I applaud the players for knowing their options and having options and making the best decision for them. I think it's great. I think this is a big positive in what has been otherwise a negative time in college athletics, to see how the university, the coaching staff, the players have handled this. So I applaud everybody involved, because, Murph, honestly, they could have Jeff. They could have easily not told us anything, and we may not have known anything for weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
So it was overall it was well handled. Yeah, and the other thing is that everyone wants to go. Like you said, it being a negative story now doesn't matter, right? What really matters is what's the end result. Because if UCF ends up playing well without all those guys, who cares who cares in the end run, right? So, yeah, to me that's kind of a non-story. Anyway, all right, let's take a break. When we get back, we'll talk about some things around the American. We'll also talk about what's the deal with football attendance and the issues that came out, or the information that came out from UCF and Danny White over this past week. And we'll have a Major League Baseball update. Drew Butera making a little bit more history. Stick around. Be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Eric, and Brian with you here. Follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret, also on Facebook at facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And, of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for your UCF Knights, who, interestingly enough, released their information on home attendance. Danny White provided an update over the weekend. Actually, it was on Monday, detailing a bunch of things that I think were pretty interesting, not just having to do with what football is going to look like, but also having to do with the budget and how COVID-19 has actually affected UCF's budget. We'll get to that in a second, but first the game day stuff. UCF is going to be hosting home games at 25% capacity, which I wrote, a little bit later was a little bit of a surprise considering that Sheriff Jerry Demings, not Sheriff Jerry Demings, what am I saying? The Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings, who expressed some skepticism earlier last week about Orlando City's 25% capacity at Exploria Stadium downtown, but had no jurisdiction over it. Apparently went along with this, even though UCF's first home game right now is supposed to be October the 3rd against Tulsa. Central Florida has been actually handling COVID-19 fairly well to this point, so I think the idea is, okay, let's agree to 25% now. We could always change it later. And then we have a little bit more information, courtesy of our very own Danny Medina, who's provided us with some excellent insight on this, on exactly who will make up the approximately 11,000 fans who will be in the stands at the Bounce House. According to Danny's reporting, about 3,000 of those seats will be reserved for students, so 8,000 non-students. The capacity limit could change throughout the season. And in addition, this I found interesting, guys. There will be no season tickets for 2020. The amount paid towards season tickets for this season has been converted to an account credit for all season pass holders. This is according to what Danny has written, which can then be turned into 4-game or 2-game packages or single-game tickets for Tulsa and Temple. According to an email sent to season pass holders on Tuesday, there are 3 different options for any unused account credit. Number 1, you can just get a refund. Number 2, you can apply your credit to the 2021 season ticket renewal to guarantee seats and price for next season, or you may donate all or a portion of that deposit to the Keep Charging On Fund to guarantee your seats and price for next season. The Nightmare section, also the students will be will be spread out through additional sections. Of course, normally they're in the north side, but they're not usually in the north and the south side. Depends on where it depends on where you end up. But for the student tickets, there will be a lottery, and for 1,500 of them, and then you can bring a friend, basically. So, and all ticketing will be digital as well. There will be no tailgating in the UCF parking lots at least for the October 3rd game. There will be some photo stations at Iowa Plaza. The tailgate concert series won't happen, and there will be no on-field performances for the bands or cheer or dance teams. And all fans and staff will be required to wear a face covering while in the stands. So, I was pretty interested by the whole thing with with them going with no season tickets at all, and then what you can decide to do. I think they're doing the fans a solid. You can get a refund, or you can put it towards next year. We saw a couple of schools in the American actually do something. So I think Memphis was doing something very similar to that. But what I thought was really interesting was a little bit further down in Danny White's letter was some of the information that he provided about UCF's financial impacts related to COVID-19. First of all, he said that they're projecting a $10 to $14 million loss due to the reduced number of football home games and limited stadium capacity, and a projected $2 million loss due to additional COVID-19 expenses, basically things that $2 million that they had to spend on COVID-19 stuff that they weren't planning on spending it overall. So right now, and this is according to Danny White's letter, to help mitigate the revenue shortfall and cover the cost of COVID-19 safety measures, the athletic department has created a new fundraising campaign. That's the Keep Charge Now Fund, which we talked about before. This is the one that we talked about before that the coaches had donated to. The goal for the Keep Charge Now Fund was $2 million in unrestricted giving. Thus far, the coaches and staff have committed $900,000, while alumni and fans have committed more than $100,000. So they're about halfway to that goal. In addition, UCF is eliminating about $1.6 million, or a 10% reduction, within administrative and sport budgets compared to last year. They were prepared with the assumption that full seasons would be played in all sports. However, additional reductions will be necessary as decisions are being made regarding competition. Construction projects, approximately $4.5 million, all on hold. And there's a hiring freeze, even for unfulfilled positions at UCF Athletics. So right now, we're actually seeing the financial impact of COVID-19, and it sounds to me like that's going to continue forward into the spring. Now, Eric, you talked prior to the break about how you thought UCF was handling the opt-out situations. How's UCF handling this publicly, do you think?
Well, I feel bad for the ticket reps. I have to get phone calls and emails from people complaining about this from fans. I feel for them. Their work is cut out for them. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a tough situation. So there's no perfect answer on this. It's a crappy situation for everybody involved. Yeah, I think as far as the ticket thing, I mean, I don't know what other options you would prefer that they do if you didn't like this options. I mean, the problem they're in is everybody's dealing with this. Everybody's dealing with this. UCF's not alone in this, and every school is dealing with this right now. And honestly, I mean, I'm surprised they got 25% like you did to get people in the building. So the good news is, from a UCF standpoint, is you're going to have revenue coming in from that. So from a UCF standpoint, I like that. Then again, there's also the person who's lived for 20 years in Orange County that's wondering, is that a good idea to get back to normal soon? Who knows? That's above my pay raise. I'll defer to you two because you are in charge of the unofficial Black and Gold Banneret medical staff. Just like every conference, we have a medical staff, so I'll defer to you two on that. But yeah, I mean, as far as
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on podcasts anyway.
That's right.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
I mean, but as far as losing the money because of COVID, join the club. I mean, who isn't losing money with COVID right now? I mean, outside of Zoom, if you own Zoom, you're probably making money.
Well, it's to what extent are you losing that money and you can't get it back? I think is the thing that they have to think about.
Sure.
it's going to be easy for your Power 5 conferences to recoup that with the money that they get from the TV networks, right? But for UCF, attendance is a much larger piece of the pie, and I think that's rearing its head right now. It's going to be a tough year. Boy, you hope that we have this thing under control for next year, because I think that overall, again, it's the same situation as everyone else. You're doing the best you can, given the circumstances. Murph, what do you think?
Well, it's not a $30 million loss, right?
Right.
Like, at least it's not that, which was deemed to be the worst case scenario back a few months ago by Danny White. And I just imagine, every week that goes by, Danny will be looking in and checking and whispering to whoever he can to see can we bump that 25% figure up to like 28? How about 30? How about 31? Because again, in the release about what's going to happen, a lot of that is for season-long home games. But as far as the 25% fans and the student section and then tailgating, all of that pertains to only the Tulsa game, the home opener on October 3rd. So this is all some of it is just sort of like, look, this is where we're at now, but we're not ruling out that we can improve these numbers if conditions warrant down the line. And I just imagine like every day, Danny White is just crossing his fingers, hoping they can maybe increase it a little more for the next home game, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. But
he's probably frustrated because obviously, remember when he last spoke to the media, he talked about having a bunch of home games, trying to get 5, 6, 7 home games. The thought was they would have the FIU game. That did not work out. There was speculation they might get FAMU as an independent. That didn't work out, and they're kind of stuck. Right? I mean,
then Josh Heupel started teasing us about a home game.
So let me ask. So do you think that still could be in play, or do you think there's nothing to that?
I don't understand how that could be in play now. We're in September. Like, how do you add a game with now?
Well, we remember a couple years ago when we added that Austin Peay game after the hurricane. I mean, if it happened then, it can certainly happen now, can't it?
I should have known that, but it was just interesting because again, that was a few weeks ago, and so and Josh is pretty tight-lipped about such things, so I don't think he would have said something unless he knew, and just didn't want to spill the beans. He was going to let Danny or UCF do it, but obviously he knew something, and that's why he sort of hinted at, well, I think we're going to have more than 9 games. And then since then, nothing has happened. They're still at 9 games, and we'll see. But certainly, it seems unlikely to me, at the very least, that they're going to add a 10th.
Well, I mean, I'm not ruling it out. I'm not ruling it out.
Well, and this year, especially, you can't rule anything out. Especially, if you want to open a game later on. Here's the other question. I first guessed this. I wrote about this for Black and Gold Banneret. Right now, if you go to Black and Gold Banneret, you can check out our buddy Andrew article, Top 10 Non-Conference Games that the American has, by Andrew Gluchoff. Of course, you can follow him at Statboy Drew. Here's the question I have. If they would have gone with my idea of going 10 conference games, and this is the thing I don't get with Mike Oresco, and if he does a media availability, I hope somebody asks him this. I don't know why they didn't go with the model similar to the ACC, where you could have 10 conference games and then have 1 or 2 non-conference games if that's what schools wanted to do, because under that scenario, you would have been guaranteed 5 home games and 5 road games, which would have helped Danny White right now in this situation. Mm-hmm. Instead, he kind of got burned here. Now, granted, other teams in the league have already filled up games. They were much more successful in that. My question to both of you, and Andrew wrote the top 10 non-conference games. It's on the site right now. Was this worth it for the American to go 8 conference games and try to schedule non-conference games? Because, somebody asked me this question in response to last week's podcast in my comments about UCF's chances to the playoff. And they asked the question is, do you think they would let them in only playing 9 regular season games plus, in theory, a conference championship game, so 10 games. Could that hurt them down the road? And I really didn't respond because I didn't know how to answer that. I have to think about that. That's an interesting question. Do you think that the American might regret not going 10 conference games? That's my question to both of you.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess in the sense that, like, could UCF would have been nice if they picked up a game against, I don't think they're playing SMU.
It would have been either SMU or Navy. It would have been either SMU or Navy. One of them would have been at home. The other one would have been on the road.
Right.
I would have rather. I mean, I would love to. I mean, I think UCF would like to play SMU because they should be a pretty decent team.
Right.
So,
and that's an extra home game in the gate, and you have 5 home games.
Yeah. Maybe so. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
You got to remember that it's not just UCF who's dealing with this problem, and what may have not have worked out for UCF does work out for someone, by the way, like SMU, who has the full complement of 4 non-conference games. Granted, they're all in the state of Texas, but 2 of them are against in-state schools that are in FBS, but Texas State and North Texas. But they get their Friday game at TCU, so that gets in there. They're also bringing in Stephen F. Austin. I think that at the time when they made that decision, they tried to – this is what the American, I think, their overall philosophy with all these policies are. You're trying to afford the maximum amount of flexibility for all of your members, right? That's why they didn't immediately come out and say we're only playing conference games like the Big Ten did. They're saying – what they're saying right now is we'll keep it at 8. We'll afford you guys the maximum amount of flexibility so that if things go well, hey, we can add some games, maybe with some Big 12 teams, maybe with some ACC teams, because they might be looking for stuff. Who knows? And in that respect, remember when UCF was able to confirm the Georgia Tech game, things were looking up at that point. Well, circumstances changed, right? I don't fault the American for trying to give their members as much latitude as possible, because we're seeing, look at what's going on with the Big Ten right now and how they tried to, they're saying, look, we're going to play in the spring. Well, now there's all these, there's also some real, some rumor dropping about, maybe they'll start in November or October. We don't know yet. No decision's been made yet. And regardless of how skeptical you are of that, what a mess that is for the Big Ten. If the American did the same exact thing, well, how what's the national narrative of that? God, look at the American. They call themselves Power 6, but they can't even get their football schedule together. In this respect, you give your members as much latitude as possible, and if it works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right, but I mean, I'm just because Mike Oresco and Murph, you could back me up on this. During this whole time, he's talked about how they probably are looking at what the Autonomous 5 is looking at, and that they would probably do the same thing. And if he didn't say it, it was reported that was kind of the lean. And yet, he didn't really do what the ACC or the Big 12 did. Like, the ACC went to 10 conference games and 1 non-conference. I would have thought they would have done that instead of going 8. And my concern is your biggest brand, UCF, who might be your best team, could be in a scenario where you're undefeated, and you might get left out of the playoffs because the committee's going to say, you didn't play as many games as, say, the ACC or the Big 12 champion. I think that could be something to monitor if it plays out that way.
Oh, boy. Twitter's going to be a lot of fun if that happens. I did want to give a shout-out to a couple people who, by the way, have the hardest jobs in all of UCF athletics right now. Brad Strickland, the Executive Associate AD and Chief Financial Officer, and Patrick Ransdell, who's the Chief Revenue Officer. Godspeed, guys. It's a tough time, but we're with you. Okay, just hang in there. We trust you. Trust that your efforts are appreciated by the fans, and hopefully will be rewarded handsomely at some point. Brad is such a cool dude. He's also the sports administrator for volleyball, so I've known Brad for a long time, and he's just an excellent guy. He was actually, remember, Brad was the interim AD briefly when George O'Leary resigned, and before Danny White was hired. Brad Strickland was the interim athletic director for UCF for a period of time and stuck around. Brad's a cool dude, and we stand Brad Strickland on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. A couple other things that we want to talk about that are actually on-field related. Believe it or not, they did have a media poll for the American preseason rankings. And wouldn't you know it, your UCF Knights are number 1. 10 first-place votes out of the 20 media who were polled. Ahead of Cincinnati, number 2 with 7 first-place votes. Memphis, 3rd with 2. SMU, 4th. Navy had 1 first-place vote. They're 5th. USF picked last. East Carolina, UCF's conference opener, picked next to last. Tulsa, UCF's home opener, picked 3rd to last. First, the important stuff. Let's get that out of the way first. Did either of you guys place a ballot in this?
We were not asked, and it should be noted that usually
this is a disappointment.
In a normal year, you get there are 30 people that vote in this poll. So this year there were only 20.
Yeah.
Wow.
Clearly, we did not make the cut.
The one thing I disagree strongly with what Josh Heupel said this week on Tuesday. He said that nobody remembers a preseason poll. I disagree because I remember last year's preseason poll and our very own Brian Murphy picking the Memphis Tigers. Okay, I remember that vividly, Murph. I only bring
throwing the
up,
bulletin board and material out there like he did. Jeez.
That being said, Murph, I bring that up because we've talked about opt-outs here with UCF, and I would argue, as with all due respect to all 10 guys on that UCF list that made the opt-outs, none of them compared to the biggest opt-out in the conference this week, which resided in Memphis, which is a huge story.
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell, the running back for Memphis, elected to opt out. That to me is a massive story, and I know it is, and I know you guys agree too, right, Murph?
Well, yeah, but Kenny, Kenneth had a lot. His heart would had to be heavy. He said in his statement that he had lost 4 family members to COVID-19, and that is really the reason why he's opting out. I can only imagine what this year has been like for him to be so directly impacted by this virus. Speaking from a football standpoint, I do not know. I don't have great insight on who is next on the Memphis depth chart, but Kenneth Gainwell was the only AP All-American in this conference. And so now he's not playing. So, yes, in terms of star power, it is definitely the most impactful opt-out, but one that I think everyone can understand because of what Kenny Gainwell has experienced these past few months.
Yeah. And by the way, our thoughts go out to Kenny Gainwell because nobody should have had to deal with that kind of tragedy in any family at this point. And I can't blame the kid one bit, and our thoughts are with him. Class kid. I tell you what, how about those running backs out of Memphis who are just not just great players, but great kids too?
Yeah. I think people will be rooting for him moving forward.
No doubt.
And boy, you just hope things get better for him and everybody involved. And again, man, I applaud all these players. They got to do what they got to do, and they're and being unselfish and doing what's best for them. And I applaud that since big time. So
applause to the coaches too for giving them the latitude to do that. I wish the fans were a little bit more forgiving sometimes, but
that'd be nice. To back to your point about the conference preseason standings, I do think they got it right as far as the top 4, top 5 teams.
Yep.
I think that's pretty strong. I like SMU a lot. I think obviously we're going to, believe it or not, guys, some of these teams will actually play this weekend. That's the rumor anyway.
Well, remember, right? SMU might be, like we were just talking about, might be at a disadvantage actually playing more games, don't you think?
Yeah.
Toward the end of the year, they're going to be more tired.
Could be more likely to lose a game or drop or two, but they're still going to be pretty good. I believe they play this weekend. So does Memphis. They're scheduled to be in prime time this weekend. And then the game I'm more interested in it's probably the only game I'll watch is the Navy BYU game on Monday night. With all due respect, the Saturday games are garbage, but I'm interested to see Navy because they return a lot of guys defensively, but they don't return Malcolm Perry. And it's going to be interesting who Ken Niumatalolo has at quarterback running that offense. And I think that's going to be fascinating because Navy's always the wild card in this. Nobody ever talks about Navy, and yet they always seem to be in the mix for the conference championship. So I'm very interested to see them against BYU on Monday night.
So quick buy and sell here. So Eric, you're buying Navy stock at 5, thinking they're going to go up.
I guess only I want to see them on Monday. I mean, I'll know better after Monday night. I want to see what the quarterback. But obviously, I'm going to trust in Ken Niumatalolo, who might be arguably the best coach in the league.
Are you selling anybody? Somebody who's way too high. You think they're going to finish way below where they
are? Let me look at it. Murph, you got any thoughts on that? Buy or sell anybody there?
We all know now who gave Navy its one first place vote, and it was obviously Eric Lopez.
Darn right.
Because UCF got 10 and 20. UCF got 10 and 20, and then Cincinnati.
Yes, Murph. Actually, all right. I will admit I stole your ballot and I turned it in. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Look, it's an interesting, because you look at the mid tier of this conference. I think it's pretty clear, what we've gained from the preseason polls, national polls. There's a top 3 in Cincinnati, UCF, and Memphis that are all close together. But even the mid tier, SMU, Navy, Tulane, I really like that mid tier. It's a pretty strong conference halfway down. You've got your obvious also Rands, and I'm sure UCF fans are experiencing a lot of schadenfreude with USF being voted last, but it's a pretty deep conference this year.
I do think it's important, and I think, guys, we've talked about this in the last week or two, and I think we're gonna, as long as the Big Ten stays out of the season, and I'm not even going to try to project what's going to happen there because there's a lot of craziness going on with that stuff. All right, I'm not going to believe the Big Ten's out until it's October 30, until it's 2021 maybe. I don't know, but with the Big Ten being out, the American is going to have a huge exposure here. We've talked about the TV slots. It was also announced that UCF will play Georgia Tech at ESPN at 3:30, not to toot our own horn, but we told you, if you listened to this podcast last week, we told you that was going to be a good time slot they were going to get for that Georgia Tech game, and they did. This is a put-up year for the American because, to your point, Murph, UCF's good. Now, I think if I had to pick a team to sell, it's Cincinnati, just because I'm skeptical how good they could be without Warren, who was their workhorse in the backfield.
But Luke Fickell got that giant contract extension, Eric.
Well, that's what happens when you drop your men's soccer program, so money frees up, I guess.
Oh.
And I do. The kid Gainwell, Murph. The kid's special. That has to. I don't care who you are. They have in the backfield. That hurts Memphis. So I would say stock up SMU and stock down to Cincinnati or Memphis, both of them. But look, this is a big year for the American because they have a chance here to get some great slots and get some wins here and get some teams ranked in the top 25 and be in the conversation for the college football playoff. I really do believe the American has an opportunity, whether it's UCF, if they run the table, or a team like Cincinnati or Memphis, SMU, to be in the conversation because with the Big Ten out of the picture, that, to me, in my opinion, that opens up a spot potentially, but they got to deliver. They got to deliver on the field, and it starts you would prefer your teams to take care of business this weekend, but the game I've got circled, Friday, September 11th, I believe is the date, SMU at TCU. That's a statement game there, with TCU from the Big 12, because odds are the American champion might be contending with the Big 12 champion for a 4th spot. You just don't know, but you got to deliver. You got to deliver now. You've always wanted the respect. You're going to get the time. You're going to get eyeballs watching you. Now it's time to put up on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, friend of the show, Chris Vanini, picked UCF to be in the CFP playoff when the Athletic did their staff-wide college football picks.
Yeah, and not to mention our old friend from SB Nation, Bill Connolly. He was mentioning that ESPN's. Or UCF rather had a 20. They were in I think the top 10 or something. Or they were in the top 20, certainly top 18. No, it was their FP. It was their FPI index had UCF as a 27% chance to make the playoff.
Yeah.
So think about that. Think about that. Better than 1 in 4.
Yep. You can't. Yeah. I could make the argument as it stands now. As long as the Big Ten stay, if I'm UCF and I'm the American, I want the Big Ten to stay away. Like
Right.
I want Donald Trump to be involved all the time, because if he stays involved, they'll probably never play a game ever again. So to me, that's huge. They could benefit them. This is why they're sticking around, because they have the most to gain. And the one team in the American, you're right, the team that I think has the best shot is UCF, because of the track record they've had the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And the narrative is there to be had, but you got to produce it. That's why I mentioned the scheduling. I hope UCF, it doesn't come back to haunt them, the lack of games they have. You mentioned the disadvantage about SMU, but at least SMU has a full slate, so the committee can't punish them for a lack of games like they could potentially to UCF. But this is I think it's the most important year for the American in its existence because of the opportunities it presents itself. And you can make the argument this could be the most important season in UCF football history.
Wow. Eric Lopez bringing the heat here. I'm digging
Bourbon
this.
Street, man. Let's make it happen. Bourbon Street for
No, not Bourbon Street. Listen, we want Murph to return to his old stomping grounds in Pasadena, California. We want to see UCF in the Rose Bowl, baby. That would be just amazing.
Oh, that would just stick it to the Big Ten now, wouldn't it?
That would be just the
Murph,
most
how would the
remarkable
Pac-12 and
thing
Big
ever.
Ten people handle that? That the granddaddy of them all is going to be black and gold end zone, baby, huh?
All I can hear is Keith Jackson and like calling a UCF game. That's all I hear. The voice of Keith Jackson.
God rest the Godfather, Keith Jackson.
Oh God, I don't see. The only thing I worry about that is I feel like UCF fans would be criticizing Keith because Keith would be like, "Well, that's a Central Florida touchdown, oh Nelly," and instead of just being an honor of Keith Jackson calling our game, we're gonna be mad that he's calling a Central Florida.
We could, well, you know what, let's say if it happened, you would probably have Fowler and Herbstreit, who are familiar with UCF, obviously, having been here for the Cincinnati game in 2018, right?
Yes, they always call the Rose Bowl. You're correct on that.
They always do the Rose Bowl.
I really do, guys. I really think if UCF runs the table, they're going to have people on their side. This is, because they've done it now for a few years. And I know we said this 3-4 years ago, and people didn't want to hear it. Oh, that's not fair. It should be about now and this. The success of 17 and 18 could pay off this year because you have it, but you got to produce it on the field, for sure. To your point, but yeah, I mean that's why this is. There's a lot at stake here, a lot to gain. I don't want to say at stake because it's more to gain than lose if you're the American or UCF. But it's a huge opportunity here for this league. They can make themselves. If things go a certain way for them.
Stop, Eric. Stop while you're ahead. You're getting people's hopes way too high up here.
Hey man, just call it.
I know. It's like, oh God, boy, wouldn't that be something?
I'm feeling all tingly inside.
I know.
Did you like my Keith Jackson there? Huh? Like a little. Hey, Dylan Gabriel with a touchdown, Central Florida. And he would call us Central Florida because he would always call USC Southern California. It was just great. I mean, just awesome.
Central Florida. But, gosh, boy, wouldn't
as long as he just calls us the Knights and not the Golden Knights, I'm good.
Fowler and Herbstreit would do us right on that. I think they would do us a solid on that.
Cincinnati game a couple of years ago. They were great.
That was great. Last thing before we wrap things up, we got a little bit of baseball catching up to do, Murph.
Baby.
Our boy Dylan Moore has not returned yet from the injured list with his wrist injury, although we expect him to be back this weekend. Is that right?
Yeah, he could come back this weekend from his wrist injury. Correct.
Okay, and resume his pursuit of the American League Most Valuable Player award.
He's got some ground to make up. But I guess anything's possible in the parlance of Kevin Garnett.
Exactly. Anything is possible, and certainly this is. What did we have here? Ben Lively got his KBO stats up there. Certainly had a rough outing his last time out against Kiwoom back on the 30th. That was on Sunday. He threw 4 2/3, 126 pitches, gave up 3 earned runs, 10 hits. Walk 3, no strikeouts against Kiwoom as the KBO season progresses, but we're keeping an eye on Ben. And then some history for one Drew Butera. So Drew, with the Rockies, another pitching outing in mop-up duty for Drew Butera. Made a little bit of history, didn't he, Murph?
Yes, he did, Jeffrey. First of all, as is usually the case when you have position players pitching, Drew got involved in the 8th inning of an absolutely horrendous baseball game in which the Rockies were trailing by about 20 runs in the 8th. So they decided to call upon Drew for his 7th career pitching appearance, his first since 2018. He then became the first Rockies pitcher of that game in which they allowed 23 runs to throw a scoreless inning. They had 5 previous pitchers who, again, are actual pitchers who didn't throw a scoreless inning, and yet Drew Butera comes in and did, and also struck somebody out, struck out a real major league hitter. It is, like I said, his 7th overall appearance, and he is, I want to bring this up, he is, along with his father, Sal Butera, who was also a catcher in baseball back a few decades ago. Sal actually made 2 career appearances as a pitcher in his career. So Sal and Drew are the only father-son position players to ever pitch in a Major League Baseball game. Now that, it's just...
That's information you can't get anywhere else but right here on the Black Gold Banneret Podcast.
I will say that Drew Butera has certainly lost some of his fastball. Actually, he's lost it entirely because he threw one last night. He's mostly throwing some humpback curveballs to the Giants at like high 70s, low 80s. I remember watching Drew. It had to have been in 2014 when he was with the Dodgers. I watched him pitch a game, and he was throwing 91, 92 miles an hour. So as he's aged, he's lost a little bit off of fastball, but like any good experienced pitcher, he's working off of his off-speed stuff. And so I think it's hilarious. Look, at this point, with how bad the Rockies have been of late, and their pitching staff is no good regardless. I mean, Kyle Freeland's been okay, but and then now I'm getting carried away. I think we might see him again at some point at this shortened season. And look, if he can throw up a scoreless inning, the Rockies can use that.
Well, interesting you bring that up because we did the research on this before we went on the air, and if he does come in, he would get a little bit closer to an interesting mark because we found this out. Now, this is unofficial, but apparently Drew Butera has the second most pitching appearances by a position player since the advent of the designated hitter. He's got 7 total for his career. And who did we determine was the leader with 11? I know he has 11.
I think it was Carlos. It was a Jimenez.
Carlos Jimenez, yeah. So far of the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
So
hey, I mean, if he sticks around, look, Drew Butera at this point. I don't know when he's going to stop playing Major League Baseball. And
I hope never.
It seems like he's going to be around forever.
I hope he's like Joe Oliver, like he just stays on a roster for about 25 years.
I mean, at this point, he might as well. And so I love this. The fact that he struck somebody out was tremendous. By the way, I believe that Drew. I believe he's now thrown 5 major league innings. I believe he hasn't walked anybody, but he has struck out 5. So again,
That's great command, man. That's great command.
Yeah.
Great strikeout to walk ratio. Yeah, the ERA is a little high, but again, his career ERA is I think 7.5. That's only like 10th, that's like middle of the pack for the Rockies.
That could be the ace for the Boston Red Sox in 2020.
I mean, really, let's be honest. So you know what? To the Colorado Rockies out there, please continue to have awful pitching performances to force Drew Butera back into these games. I loved watching this last night and looking it up and looking up stats about it, and I hope it happens again.
You saw him pitch in person.
I did, and I don't. Oh God, I hope I have time to look this up. I believe I was at the game where he struck out Marcell Ozuna, who was on I think he still might have been on St. Louis at the time. But I believe I saw him strike out Marcell Ozuna. and in a Dodger game, and that was tremendous because like it's amazing when guys get it's amazing when catchers come in and strike out legitimate major league hitters, and Drew's done it a few times, and maybe he'll continue to do it.
All right, well, we'll be watching for Drew. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up here. Anything, Murph, what do you have coming up that at least that you're looking forward to this week? We're slowly but surely tiptoeing into college football. We got some teams in the American that we're going to be watching, but I know there's a scrimmage that's supposed to take place on Saturday at UCF, which no media will be in attendance for, unfortunately. But it's what else are we looking at right now? Because since football right now is the only thing that's going to be going on.
Yeah, well, it'll be UCF's second scrimmage, and I mean, to those who are listening, or by the time you listen to this, we will now be a week away from a regular season NFL game, which blows my mind.
Which means, Murph, you know what that means, and this is a big weekend for fantasy football, getting set for the NFL. Murph, any advice as the guru of fantasy
That's
football?
right, ladies and gentlemen. You must follow Spokes_Murphy on Twitter for your up to the second fantasy football updates.
Sunday mornings, it's the best time of the year, the best time of the day. You wake up, you see Murph's tweets about NFL fantasy football, and usually I harass him if he doesn't get up. I'm like, come on, man, let's go. But I mean, can you give advice to those that are maybe doing their drafts this weekend with optimism of an NFL season on the horizon?
As I said to one of you who told me before this show started that you picked Leonard Fournette to be one of your keepers, that is not a good decision. I know he signed with the Bucs, but look, I know people won't like this. Leonard Fournette is actually not very good. He's actually not very good. He's a big dude who is a little bit of pass catching shots. He really is like a poor man's Derrick Henry, but like a really, really, really poor man's Derrick Henry. Anyway,
can we send a recording of this to Leonard Fournette just for fantasy football purposes? Just Leonard, you're not very highly regarded fantasy wise.
I also want to point this out. Yes, in a previous life, I used to wake up at 4 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday mornings to write fantasy articles, because before I started doing UCF, like I covered fantasy football for 15 years. It was a wild ride. I am trying to detox myself off of that, which is why I'm doing this. So no, I will be answering some tweets. If anybody wants to ask me start 7 questions, that's fine. But I am done with that era of my life.
I don't know.
I
think about 10. I'm thinking about 11 a.m. on not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday. It's going to be like, man, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
All right, how about this, Murph? How about this for our audience? Is there a UCF Knight you like fantasy football wise in the NFL right now? Anybody you think?
Well, Latavius Murray is probably like the guy who is most, in the catbird seat if something happens to Alvin Kamara, and certainly if you've been following the news the last couple of days, are the Saints will they be willing to trade him, which is insane. It's really just a bargaining ploy to get him another contract. But if anything happens to Kamara, Latavius Murray is going to be an RB1. He has proven that before. So yeah, certainly him. I am, as far as the new guys, I guess I'm interested to see what Gabe Davis does with the Bills, because his skill set right now is basically as a deep man, and Josh Allen has a huge arm. Josh Allen has really bad deep ball accuracy, but I'd like to see that connection a little bit this year. But otherwise, I guess we'll see.
Not high on Brashad Perriman at the Jets.
That is a disaster. I feel so bad for Brashad Perriman. Look, he really rehabilitated his career last year in Tampa Bay. He was in the perfect offense to do that, though. He was in an offense with just a quarterback who had no abandon in Jameis Winston, a system that really worked his sort of field stretching skills, which he still has. Now he goes to the Jets, where even Le'Veon Bell is barely like a mid-range RB2 at this point. And I just know I cannot see Brashad Perriman being any more than a mid-range, wide receiver 3, sort of dart throat in the bye weeks. I'd be shocked if he's consistently productive. And Look at me. Now I'm rambling as if it's like
There you go.
Beautiful.
You're
It's
back.
beautiful.
He's back,
It's
baby.
beautiful. Jeffrey, we may have to do during the season here. Just give Murph a segment on fantasy football on this show.
No.
Just go all in.
Well, since we won't have any Olympic sports to talk to, Lord knows we have time in the
What
rundown.
I'm saying, we have slots to fill. Yes, we do. It's a good point.
You don't understand.
Eric, what do you?
It's either that or I'm doing more Keith Jackson impressions the whole time.
Oh boy!
That's what we're
All right,
down
Murph,
to.
you got to save us on that one. Eric, what do you have coming up this week?
I got a new roof going to be built here in the next few days. So a lot of noise on my house. So while I deal with that, we'll be just following. We will be having the UCF assistant coaching rankings coming out. Stay tuned for that. The top 30 to come out. Plus, gentlemen, worth pointing this out. A special, unique. The September 1st this week. Special date in UCF football history. Why is that? I'll give you a second to think about it. Yes, right. I'll give you a second. September 1st, 1996, UCF became officially a Division I football program. They moved up.
Oh wow!
Was that had to have been the date of the first game as a Division I program?
That
right?
week was their first game. I think they were just
because I think you officially move up in the summer, like July 1st. I think.
Correct. Right. But their first game was they for some reason were acknowledged, and I wasn't around. They were acknowledged as September 1st, they were acknowledged as a Division I program, and they played I think later that week or so as a program. So if this season starts in a couple weeks, it would be the 25th season of UCF football in Division I. And we will have rankings of some of the most memorable UCF football games in Division I. That'll be coming out. We'll probably wait till the week of the Georgia Tech game so we don't jinx anything.
Yeah, right.
Jeff, if I could butt in here, because I like to make this show like just absolutely interminable. I should mention that we will be talking, or the UCF media will be talking with a couple of assistant coaches, since Eric brought up assistant coaches. On Thursday, we are scheduled to meet with Alex Golesh, the tight ends coach, and Anthony Tucker, the running backs coach, and I'll be writing something up off of what they say. Well, we'll see what happens there. And also, I did want to confirm that, yes, I was at the game where Drew Butera struck out Marcelo Zuna, and I undersold it. He struck him out on a 94-mile-an-hour fastball. My God.
That's UCF Athletic Hall of Famer, Drew Butera.
Bringing the gas. Nice.
Between this and the playoff talk, I need a cigarette.
All right. Well, we'll give you the opportunity to do that here right now. Make sure you follow us, of course, at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_Murphy. And of course, you can hit us up on Facebook at Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And by the way, don't be afraid to send us some questions here. Some listeners. I want to do another Ask the Banneret segment. I've been bad about soliciting that on Twitter. So,
and if you got fantasy football questions, we'll take that.
No. We'll leave that for next Sunday and Murph's Twitter account.
My therapist said no.
I said no. No means no. Please, no more. All right. So like I said, stay in touch with us, and we'll be soliciting some questions from the listeners as well throughout this next week. For all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, and for Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thanks for listening. We'll catch you again next week as we get 1 week closer to full-scale college football, or at least as much as we're going to see in the fall, and UCF's opener against Georgia Tech. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you later.